Imagine your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. You drag yourself out of bed, gulp down a cheap coffee, sit in gridlocked traffic, and stare at a glowing rectangular screen for 8, maybe 10 hours. By the time you get home, you're exhausted. You do this 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, until you're 65. We call this making a living. But for 99% of human history, this concept would have seemed absolutely insane. Before the invention of agriculture, before money, and long before the 9-to-5 job, humans lived a life that modern anthropologists call the original affluent society. And the truth about what they did all day is going to make you seriously question your entire modern existence. For decades, the modern world pictured ancient hunter-gatherers as desperate savages, constantly starving and fighting for their lives in a brutal, unforgiving wilderness. We assumed their lives were, as philosopher Thomas Hobbes famously put it, nasty, brutish, and short. But in the 1960s, an anthropologist named Marshall Solins flipped this entirely upside down. Solins analyzed data from surviving hunter-gatherer tribes like the Kung San people of the Kalahari Desert and indigenous tribes in Australia. What he found completely shattered our modern ego. These tribes weren't starving. They weren't working themselves to the bone. In fact, they only worked about 15 to 20 hours a week. Let that sink in. Their work week was less than half of yours. Their primary jobs consisted of foraging for nuts, berries, and tubers, or occasionally tracking an animal. And because their environments were naturally rich in resources, it only took about 3 to 4 hours a day to gather enough food for the entire tribe. Once they had enough calories for the day, they just stopped. There was no hustle culture. There was no grinding for a promotion. When the basic needs were met, the work was completely done. So if they only worked 3 or 4 hours a day, what exactly did ancient humans do with the rest of their time? They lived, truly, deeply lived. With roughly 80% of their waking hours, completely free ancient humans dedicated their time to things that actually mattered to human biology. First and foremost, socializing. Human brains are biologically hardwired for community. They spent hours sitting around the campfire gossiping, telling stories, and building intense social bonds. This wasn't just for fun. This deep social connection released massive amounts of oxytocin and serotonin, keeping their mental health in peak condition. They also slept a lot. Without the artificial glow of smartphones or office fluorescent lights, their circadian rhythms were perfectly synced with nature. They slept when it got dark, woke up when the sun rose, and frequently took massive afternoon naps during the hottest parts of the day. They played games. They created art like the breathtaking cave paintings found in Lascaux, France. They made music using bone flutes and drums. They engaged in spiritual ritual, and they spent an enormous amount of time simply resting, doing absolutely nothing, and being present. You might be wondering, why didn't they just work harder to get more stuff? The answer is simple. They were nomadic. If you have to move your camp every few weeks to follow animal herds or seasonal plants, owning a lot of stuff isn't a sign of wealth. It's a massive burden. You literally have to carry everything you own on your back. Because accumulating material possessions was physically impractical, they had almost no concept of personal wealth. And without the concept of wealth, there was no extreme inequality. There were no billionaires and no homeless cavemen. Everyone shared the food, and everyone shared the free time. Solins argued that they were the original affluent society, not because they had a lot of things, but because they desired very little. Their wants were easily satisfied, leaving them universally rich in the most valuable currency of all, time. So what went wrong? How did we go from chilling by the fire with our friends to crying in a cubicle on a Tuesday morning? The trap was set about 10,000 years ago with the agricultural revolution. Scientist and historian Jared Diamond famously called agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. When humans figured out how to plant wheat and domesticate animals, we stopped moving. We settled down. And immediately our workload exploded. Farming is incredibly labor-intensive. Instead of picking food that nature grew for free, humans now had to clear land, plow soil, plant seeds, pull weeds, carry water, and harvest crops from dawn until dusk. Our 15-hour work week turned into a brutal 60-hour grind of back-breaking manual labor. And it gets worse. Because agriculture allowed us to store surplus food, it created something brand new: property. Suddenly, some people had more grain than others. To protect that grain, we needed walls. To guard the walls, we needed soldiers. To organize the soldiers, we needed kings. Before we knew it, we had created social classes, taxes, landlords, and extreme inequality. We traded our freedom and our free time for the illusion of security. Fast forward to today, and we are still caught in the trap. The Industrial Revolution just swapped the wheat fields for factories, and the information age swapped the factories for office cubicles. Evolutionarily speaking, our bodies and brains are still identically wired to those ancient hunter-gatherers. We are designed to move frequently, be outside, exist in tight-knit community, and experience brief bursts of stress followed by deep, extended relaxation. Instead, we sit completely still, staring at screens, isolated in small apartments, experiencing a constant low-level drip of chronic stress about deadlines, rent, and inflation. This evolutionary mismatch is exactly why modern society is facing a massive epidemic of anxiety, depression, insomnia, and burnout. You aren't broken. You aren't lazy for hating the 9-to-5 grind. You are a prehistoric human perfectly adapted prepared for a world of community and leisure, currently living in a high-tech corporate zoo. So the next time you feel guilty for taking a nap or wanting to just do nothing, remember that for 99% of human history, doing nothing was the entire point of being alive.